Hi, everyone. Welcome to journey number 8. We just did a restart because I totally screwed up the name right off the bat. But today we are joined by Emma Krebs.
Hello. Don't even worry.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited that you're here. I've been looking forward to this, and this is the first time that it's somebody outside of, call it like, my circle that I'm actually interviewing.
Oh, no way. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess starting off here, just love to hear a little bit more about yourself, kind of where you grew up, what you're doing now, what kind of kid you are, everything like that.
Totally. This is my first time kind of answering these questions, so it'll be a new experience for me as well. So I'm Emma. I've grown up. I was born and raised here in Calgary, and had kind of your average childhood. Very fortunate to have a very close family, a really strong foundation. When I was in about grade 6, though, my parents did divorce, so that was an interesting experience to navigate. But in some regards, it did bring us all closer together and more honest with each other. And then I went through school and everything like that. And as I began to get older, my passions and my interests really started to begin to manifest within my life. So after I graduated high school, I actually went to school for holistic nutrition.
Okay.
So I was vegan at the time, and I was fascinated by food. I still am, but more the aspect of holistic living I'm really interested in personally. So I finished that. I'm a certified holistic nutritionist, which is amazing. And then I pursued something I had wanted to do since I was 17, which was go to Australia. For some reason, I had a calling to go there. And so I booked a one-way ticket, packed a carry-on bag, and I headed to Australia. Didn't know how long I was going to go for. And I ended up staying for 2 years. So it was a life-changing experience for sure. And then since I have arrived back from Canada due to my visa ending, as of January of this year, I actually started my very own podcast, which is called the Curious One Podcast. And that's a quick summary of how we got to where we are today. So, yeah.
Super cool. And so holistic nutrition. Can
Yes.
you explain a little bit about what that means? And you said, kind of living holistically and, this whole concept around that. Can you just explain a little bit about what that means to people?
Totally. Yes. Um, so holistic living is holism as in mind, body, and spirit. So the aim with holistic nutrition is aligning your mind, body, and spirit through nutrition.
Okay.
I was always fascinated by nutrition, as I said, and I think around the age of 17, I had gone vegan, and I was vegan for about 3 years during the time of nutrition school as well. And it kind of will tie into maybe my podcast and everything, but I would find myself Googling things and researching things. I would read books at 17 about food, and all my friends thought I was a bit weird, and I get excited by like superfoods. And so, I didn't find the generic university college kind of route like aligned with myself. So once I discovered that there's alternative medicine as well as alternative schooling and etc., I discovered CSNN, which is the school I went to, so Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. And I went there and yeah, sorry, I didn't really answer the question, but it's aligning mind, body, and spirit with nutrition. But that also ties into like diet and lifestyle supplementation, spirituality, other practices as well, if that kind of answered it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you said, so you were vegan, not vegan anymore?
Not vegan anymore. After I attended the school, I actually transitioned back to eating animal products.
Okay.
Yes.
And just kind of curious, because it's actually a world that I've, let's say, dipped my toe in more
Mm-hmm.
so just by talking to people and not actually trying it myself. But, what was, it seems to be gaining so much momentum,
Mm-hmm.
especially the last couple of years. And, what made you decide to go vegan? And then, what made you decide to transition out of it?
Totally. Going vegan, it was a really long time ago. Probably it was documentaries that really began educating myself on where my food was coming from and questioning what it was I put in my body. I always knew I liked food, and it was kind of when I was dabbling into eating healthier, and I always was active as a kid, so I would work out and I wanted to fuel my body properly. So I started watching documentaries, all of them, Food Inc., What the Health, like everyone's seen them. And I was getting angry because there was this information I never really had thought of or been given throughout my life. And so I think it was mainly those that really pushed me. And then I started educating myself on nutrition and veganism and what it was. And I really aligned with it. To be honest, I never really enjoyed eating animal products either. So kind of an excuse not to eat chicken. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of talk out of both sides of my mouth though. But so I was vegan for about 3.5 years, and my relationship with food really transitioned into not a healthy place. If something was vegan, I thought it was healthy, even if it was a bag of sweet chili heat Doritos or Oreos, which are both vegan in Canada.
Yeah.
And I found myself just not eating enough macronutrients and not eating enough calorically, and just my relationship with it was really warped. And so it was starting to manifest in my body. I was always cold. My friends would tell me I looked really fatigued and I had bags under my eyes, and I just wasn't fueling myself in the correct way. And I really did my body was craving animal products again. So I slowly transitioned. I began eating eggs for a long time, and I slowly ate chicken, and then I introduced the meats. But yeah, I don't eat it too often now, but that's kind of where I came at. But you can definitely eat a vegan diet. And eat it in a healthy way. You just have to be mindful of the macro and micronutrients for sure.
For sure. And, there's always that extra level that a lot of people, in, so
Mm-hmm.
many things, and a lot of people don't think
Mm-hmm.
about it. Because I had that view as well of, the vegan diet of, oh, it's healthy, right? And then I
Yeah.
realized that, well, I guess technically French fries can be vegan, right? And are vegan, right? And so, yeah, seeing some people and talking to some people, and that, didn't do a lot of that homework and didn't have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of intentionality behind it, and kind of fell into that, a similar sort of trap that, you fell into of, oh, Oreos are vegan. And so therefore I can eat them and I'm being healthy because I'm vegan.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But yeah,
Yeah,
super cool.
definitely. I
Um,
also think, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
One other thing was diet is a very personal thing. And I think at the time when I was vegan, my values lied in a different place. And then I transitioned into realizing that I really have to take care of myself and my health.
Yeah.
And that had to put other things below it, unfortunately. And so that is also too why I kind of transitioned. I don't know if that made any sense,
It
but I
did.
was trying to make a point there. But
No,
anyways.
no, it gave some clarity for sure. Backing up a little bit. So in your family, are you an only child, or do you have any siblings?
I am the youngest by a lot. I was the gift from God, as my mother likes to say. I was very much an accident. So my
Okay.
siblings are quite older than me. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And if you don't mind, I just want to ask a little bit, because you said that your parents did end up getting divorced. However, it brought a lot of, almost clarity to a lot of those relationships.
Mhm.
Do you mind talking about that really quickly? Because I know that there are a lot of people that have gone through, their parents getting divorced. I've been blessed where, my parents are still together, but I do think it is, a very tough time for anybody going through it. And I think a lot of people go through it. And a lot of times, the kids sometimes get left behind, right? With the parents, so focused on each other. So yeah, just anything that comes to mind on that time period, um, you know, how it affected you, if there were any strategies that helped you get through it, if you're able to pull any silver linings from it, anything like that.
For sure. Um, the first thing that comes to mind is honesty, which I think I mentioned before. Just with my parents having a really beautiful relationship when they were together, truly it was something I look up to. But then coming to terms with realizing that to go forward, they need to go separately. And just being honest about that, because I feel sometimes no matter how long you've been together or what age you're at, I personally feel sometimes people will remain in relationships out of fear of judgment, or just it's hard going through a divorce. I couldn't imagine it would be hard. Any sort of breakup is hard. And so just having the honesty to say, going forward, I need to do this alone, and really prioritizing that. As well, with my father, I was quite young, so I was about 12, and I said we're a close family, but I was really more like a mama's girl. Whereas through the divorce, there was a lot of hard conversations, a lot of difficult conversations. But in the end, my dad and I's relationship really formed the foundation that it is today. And he's someone, both of my parents are just influential in my life. So that was one thing. And then amongst my siblings, just the morale between us, it was something we all were going through together, and only we could relate in the experience that we had together because we have our parents. And again, it just built the foundation for a relationship I'm really proud and really honored to have with both my siblings today. Going through it, advice, man. I know this is difficult for some people and it completely depends on the age and other factors. But as a child, if you can remain out of it, that would be my number one thing. Just it's between your parents, and put up boundaries for yourself if you're old enough to say like this isn't between me and my father or my mother. Like you guys can talk directly or you guys can sort it out yourselves. And no, it's not about you either. It's between them.
For sure. And I think that's such a tough thing to do though, right? You know, if you think,
Definitely.
right, or like,
Yeah.
if I would have done it, playing the if game, right? If I would
Mhm.
have done this, maybe this wouldn't have happened. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's really, really good advice. And thank you for sharing that. And, you brought something up that I've been, kind of going into a lot the last, call it year, of boundaries. Because I came to realize that I was absolutely terrible at them and they were basically
Me
non-existent.
too.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I was just kind of curious your relationship with boundaries. Is it something
Ooh.
that you have been working through? Is it something that you're now better at? Have you always had kind of a knack for implementing them when you didn't even realize it?
Good question. Really good question. I would be probably the same as you. It's something I've only really explored recently, and I'm very much at the beginning of that journey. Especially with the divorce thing with the parents. Now that I'm getting older, I was quite young then, so I didn't know to speak up and to say that I could say no. No is a complete sentence. That's been my logo lately.
I love
Um, slogan, I mean, not logo. But boundaries. Ooh. um, I would say a lot of times I'm afraid to put up boundaries if I'm just being vulnerable right now, because I think that putting up boundaries with certain people is gonna remove them fully from my life.
yeah.
So I can't really speak to it further, man. I'm really trying to navigate myself. I'm 22, so I feel like a baby, and yeah. But I'd love to hear, like, genuinely,
Yeah.
how has boundaries been for you, especially in the past year?
Yeah, for sure. And so, kind of what you said there was really resonated with me because, in my life, growing up for, call it 20 years, basically,
Mhm.
you know, unconscious feelings that if I wasn't perfect, people wouldn't like me. Right.
Whoa.
And
Mhm.
so putting up a boundary, isn't perfection in their eyes. Right.
Mhm.
Doing something for myself and something going against maybe something that they want or they need. And
Mhm.
so, in my subconscious, I go, well, I can't do that because then they won't like me. Right. If I say no to them,
Mhm.
they won't like me. Right. And
Mhm.
so that has really been, it was always assumed worst case scenario. And it's so
Oh
funny,
yeah.
right? With like things that are so minuscule when you look at them, but you make them into a huge deal in your head, right? Um,
Mhm.
you know what? Actually, I don't feel like going out tonight, right? Or I don't feel like hanging out. I need some me time. You know, I can't say that to somebody. Our friendship will
Mhm.
be over. I don't want to hang out one time, and they're never going to talk to me and catastrophizing it like that. And so, it's really been bringing it back um, to even just the small steps for me, and that's really helped me on my journey the last year of working on them, is taking those tiny little boundaries and steps and seeing that it's all okay, right? And a huge
I
one
think
has
that's
been with
great.
my family, that I started implementing some boundaries with them, and especially like with my sister. And it scared the shit out of me, to be honest. And then it's like, oh, this is okay. Like, interesting. Maybe I can do this, right? And yeah, so I mean, still very much working through it, but that is where a lot of my relationship with boundaries came from.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm sure it even makes those relationships stronger though as well at the end of the day, because you're showing up as your more authentic self, and also too, you're not, there's no resentment because you're being honest and you're asking for what you want from it as well. So I
Yeah,
respect that. That's
thank you.
awesome.
Yeah. And it, it feeds into this other idea that, I've been thinking a lot about the last year or so. Um, and it's the idea, and I'm not going to lie, I stole it from Gary Vee, but, it's
Totally.
being selfish to be selfless, right?
Mm,
And, for me being quote unquote selfish of putting up that boundary because I need to, fill my cup, or I need to do it for my mental well being, actually allows me to be better in those relationships for the other people, right? With me being more solid, with me being, having the more energy, having a fuller cup, I'm able to then share in those relationships. And it's like you said, it's actually been beneficial, right? Of putting in those boundaries and doing things for myself has actually made those relationships a lot stronger.
I feel like you're speaking to me like directly right now. Like this is really resonating. And it's as Andy says, like, I might demolish it. Or he shares a lot about pouring from a full cup
Yeah.
or an overflowing cup, right? I'm
Yeah.
demolishing. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's something that especially in the past few months, it's definitely been something I'm trying to remind myself for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
No, he talks about that a lot. And yeah, the idea that you can't pour from an empty cup,
That's
right?
it.
You have
Yes.
to,
Yeah.
you have to fill your own cup first,
Hmm.
before you can pour it into others. So
Hmm.
yeah, I would love to hear more about the trip to Australia. So you were there for 2 years.
Totally.
Um,
Yes.
why did you go? What did you learn? Um, yeah, just kind of talk about it.
Totally. Um, so I had a calling to Australia since I was 17. I truly don't know what pushed me to go there. It might have been movies I watched as a kid. And so I was going to go at a really young age of 17 when I graduated, and then other things happened in life. And I was graduating nutrition school. I had gone through a breakup. I was fully solo because I knew when I went, I wanted to be like no ties. And that was kind of coming up in my life. So I booked a one-way trip there. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't know a single person, and I just started googling things. I love the platform of YouTube. I know that sounds odd, but it just exposed me to different ways of living. And so I would watch people that live in Australia and see where they were, and then I'd Google like different suburbs that they were in. And then I booked my flight to Australia and I arrived there and I started my journey doing woofing for the first month.
Okay, what's woofing?
So, woofing, I don't know what it's WOOF. I'm not sure what the acronym stands for, but it's essentially working for accommodation,
Okay.
normally on farms. So, I was working in the Daintree rainforest. So, I did that for the first leg of my time there, and it was an insane experience. But I was doing housekeeping there because I was in a little kind of cabin retreat area. And so um, one of the main things you asked, like, what were some of the things I learned while I was there? And I could fill your whole day talking about things I learned. But I think initially the one thing that really kept resonating for me straight away was becoming comfortable being uncomfortable was huge for me, because when you go traveling, every day is completely different. It's unknown. You don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know what experience you're going to end up in. And your brain gets scared because it can't picture where it is you're headed to. And so that was something that was really instrumental for me. And just realizing that that's how you grow, is stepping into that uncomfort and facing the uncomfort. And that's really when I felt like I began to build a stronger connection with myself as well. And another thing that was really a big lesson, especially at the beginning, was realizing by being my authentic self and showing up as I am, because again, I had nothing to hide behind. I had no job. You have the clothes on your back. Like, you're just you. You're Emma from Canada. Being my authentic self was finding individuals that resonated with who I was and wanted to be friends with me, if this makes sense. Because just throughout my life, I struggled to connect with individuals. I had like one friend growing up, and then otherwise I spent a lot of time flying solo. So discovering my like-minded people was really an amazing time. But I didn't really talk about actual Australia, but yeah. If you have any,
No, that's okay at all.
but yeah.
Um, a question for you is, do you think that it was easier to be your authentic self there because you didn't have, call it the baggage,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
when you were here of, you've established yourself as this person, right? This is how people know me. Do you think
Hmm.
that is that what made it easier, or was it more just that conscious decision that that's what you were going to do going in?
No, that definitely made it easier. And with reflection now, being home for almost a year now, stepping outside of the bubble of Calgary that I always was born and raised in, and stepping outside of my family and being on my own 2 feet, having no labels or attachments behind me, was instrumental in defining who I am today, for sure. Yeah, for
Love
sure.
that.
I recommend anyone going traveling, because you can be whoever you want, even if who you were. I'm Emma who likes purple today. I can drive, I can take a flight up to like Queensland, and I can be Emma that likes yellow, and no one knows. And so you can try different hats with your identity. And I don't mean being inauthentic, but just reflect different sides of yourself to people and see, like, do I feel comfortable with this? Do I identify with this? And just kind of navigating with that.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I find that even on a much smaller scale, but with new
Mhm.
relationships, whether that's friendships or work relationships, whatever it might
Mhm.
be, as opposed to people that you've known for a really long time.
Yes.
And, I almost refer to it as like they know old Jared, right? Because I've gone
Mhm.
through a lot of growth and a lot of changes, in the last couple of years. And, they know me as old Jared, and these new people, just know new Jared. And so sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect, or, you feel like you almost have to fit into that character, that role that you've always played, right? And
Mhm.
it's funny too how sometimes there's a friction when you try to step out of that role,
Yes.
of the other people going like, no, that's not what you do. Like,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to say that anymore. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, so that's super cool. The other
Can I
one that,
ask you a question? Oh,
yeah,
go on. Sorry.
no, go
I
ahead.
want to ask you a question about that. Do you find that you have to step back sometimes in your relationships and how you view people that you've known for a long time, and the expectation and the identity you have around them? And how do you do that?
Yeah, that's so interesting because I haven't actually turned it around on myself,
Mhm.
right?
But maybe you're doing it and you're unconscious of it,
Yeah, and
you
that's
know?
that's why it's so funny, and I'm so glad that you
Mhm.
asked that because, I just thinking about it, I think that I do, right?
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
that, it's almost that default setting of like,
Yeah.
I've always known this person, and therefore, this is what I come to expect. This is how I'm going to interact with them. This is what I expect them to do.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So, I think yeah, I'm actually super grateful for you asking that question
And
because
I didn't mean it in an accusatory way. I'm asking because now that you said that, I'm gonna be more mindful of it myself.
no,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's
Yeah.
it's not accusatory at all. It's bringing awareness to it, right?
Mhm.
Because a lot
Mhm.
of times we get so focused on ourselves, right? Of like,
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm the one that's been changing. I'm changing the rules. Other people are looking at me that way, and realizing that it is always a two-way street as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's actually something I'm going to reflect on a little bit more.
I found that as well when I went away and I came back. I had been gone for 2 years and absent from my friends' lives for 2 years,
Yeah.
and I was trying to fit myself back in the box of our relationship as to what it was before I went away. And I was like 19 when I went away. I was a baby. And so now it's like almost rebuilding this relationship with these individuals from scratch is what I'm trying to do. But it took me a lot of times trying to fit something in that didn't work. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That resonates a ton. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and I think those are, actually I had a conversation, with another guy, Benji, um,
Mhm.
this earlier this week. And we talked about how relationships never end. They just change.
Ooh.
Right. And
Mhm. Yep.
it's keeping that in mind that it's, the relationship is changing and it's always going to change, even minusculely. And sometimes that means that the closeness goes away. And sometimes that means that you can grow together and the whole relationship can change, whatever that looks like. I think also not putting the pressure on it, excuse me, of well, we've been friends for this long and therefore we have to be
Yep.
friends always,
Yep.
right? You can always be friends for sure, but maybe it looks different, and being okay with reimagining how that looks, I think is huge.
Mhm. Mhm. And when you grow, when you, like you were saying, like you're being more honest, we were talking about boundaries, but like when you're being more authentic with yourself, and so is the other person. This is any relationship. You'll be growing together when you meet and you have a friendship, but if you're both being honest and you both grow in the same direction, that's such a beautiful thing, you know? So you're saying sometimes they just change. And so when these some relationships change where you're going in different directions, it really also makes you appreciate the ones that you're growing in a similar direction too,
For
for
sure.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I wanted to touch on is you said being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Right? And I think that's
Mhm.
such a big lesson. Um, and yeah, and can you like how has that helped you in your everyday life after that? Um,
Totally.
because I went through some a very similar learning with that lesson, and
Mhm.
I think that it's one of, call it like, my best superpowers now.
Mhm.
Being okay with that, and so yeah,
Yeah.
just if you could go a little bit deeper into that, and then I'll kind of share where that's helped me.
Please do. Yeah. I love that you called it a superpower because it's exactly how I feel. I feel like it was a bit of a hack on life. And um, I read the book before I went to Australia, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, I believe
Okay.
is the title of it. And there's actually a book in, I have it behind me, or a quote in The Will to Change. And it's just essentially saying like, the only thing definitive of change is that like it's a constant factor.
Yeah.
And so with that, becoming comfortable being uncomfortable, there's a lot of things in life that make you uncomfortable, and usually the only way to move through it is leaning into that uncomfort. Otherwise you're going to remain stagnant. And to me, growth is such a important thing in my life, and whenever I feel as though I'm not growing, I freak out because when you're not growing, you're dying, is the term, right? And so um there are moments where there's many moments. There could be moments every day where you feel uncomfortable for some people, but just stepping into those, you realize how unscary these things really are. And then it's just little tiny steps. So it's stepping out and talking to a new person. It could be really scary, but then that could lead to you going to a job interview that you would have been scared for. And these things can add up, and that helps to define who you are as a person, but also to build like your dream life in a way. So that would be what I would say to that. It was just, yeah, it was just constantly being thrown out of the nest. And so that's even manifested into creating my podcast. Like I was so scared to do it. Uncomfort can be fear. And I was so nervous to do it. And you said I'm the first person outside of your bubble or your circle. Sorry. Mine was like straight away the third person I interviewed. I didn't know. It was a complete stranger. And I spoke to her via Instagram. And I was so uncomfortable. And I was like, I wasn't secure in the podcast yet. I was just starting it. I knew nothing about technology, but I just said, you know what? It's going to be uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for everyone the first time they do something. So you just got to get that uncomfort out of your system almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
But how did it manifest for you, or what was the lesson that really pushed you over the edge?
Yeah, I love that. And I don't know if it was a specific lesson. I think
Mhm.
that it
Same.
was probably, one of my first, I guess, call it my second job, and my first
Mhm.
kind of, foray into entrepreneurship. I worked for one of the student painting companies, and that made me uncomfortable every single day. And I had a new obstacle to overcome every single day. And I loved every second of it, actually. Well,
That's great.
not every second, but
Yeah.
yeah. And, it was, why I call it a superpower is it's almost, a mindset shift as well. Uh,
Yes.
you know, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, to me, almost creates this unconscious confidence in your skills that you will be able to figure it out, right? Of instead of focusing on the fear of I've never done this before, I don't know what I'm doing, like I don't know if I can do it. Switching that to I don't know what I'm doing, but I can figure it out,
Mhm.
right? And I can
Mhm.
get through it, and it'll
Mhm.
all be okay, right?
Mhm.
I've faced challenges, and I haven't faced this specific challenge. However, all of those past experiences will help me in facing this new challenge that I'm going into. So,
Hmm.
um, and you know, it's funny enough, like for me, I get very bored if I'm not growing, quote unquote, right?
Yes.
So I very much need something new, something exciting. For me, it's learning, actually. Like I just love to learn new things, and it's super random all over the map, no matter what it is, like every subject that you can think of. Uh, but
I'm
I'm
relating so hard right now.
but yeah, it's learning new things, and as soon as I fall into um, routine, I start getting that itch. I'm like, okay, I need something new. I need something new. I'm getting bored, right? Like now I know how to do this. And it's so funny too, where I'm very much of I don't like to quote unquote master anything, right? Where I just in my logical brain, I put it into percentages of I like to learn up to 90% of anything. And that last 10% doesn't interest me, right? Of, going that, I almost think of it as like a PhD, right? Of people that go and will study something for 10, 20, 30 years of their life on one specific subject or an animal specifically to know everything there is to know or as much as they possibly can. To me, that's that extra 10%, right? Where I'm like, you know what? I want that undergrad. I'll get that kind of 101. I'll know 90% of it. I won't know everything, but I'll understand a lot of it, and that's good enough for me.
Because you also want to learn about other things. And
Yeah,
if you're to go further, sometimes that would take up the space for it. Yeah.
exactly. And I try to be very conscious in mentioning that I don't necessarily think one is wrong or right as well. And I think it's, being okay because, the one that always bugs me, the saying is, um, what a jack of all trade is a master of none, right? And almost this
Mm.
demonization of being a generalist, right? And focusing on one thing and specializing in it. And again, it's not that I think that's wrong. I think that some people love to specialize in one thing, love to, spend their entire life on a subject or an interest or whatever it might be. And I think that's great. And at the same time, I think that it's also great if you want to be a generalist, if you want to learn about a wide variety of things. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I always make sure to mention that as well.
I love that because that's how I feel. And I'm trying to find this one thing. And maybe in the future there will be, but I like that I I am interested in different things and none of them connect sometimes, right? Um, I completely agree with you. Even the thing touching on if I'm not growing and I'm stagnant,
Yeah.
for me, it also affects my mental state as well. Like in 2019, I was living in a beautiful area in Australia. I was living in Sydney at Coogee Beach, like living this life that I always imagined, and I was not happy. I was not fulfilled. I was in a really bad place mentally now looking back, and
Mhm.
it was because I wasn't growing. I was stagnant for months on end. I had my job figured out. I was locked into a relationship, and it was just I was never pushed to be uncomfortable. And now that I'm out of that time of my life, it's something that I'm constantly forcing myself to be mindful of. And like, okay, have I done something that makes me feel uncomfortable lately? Have I grown? Have I had the difficult conversations? And the podcast has been something that I really have been so glad I have it because it's something that is constantly forcing me to be uncomfortable and to push myself. And as you said, to learn new things as well. So, yeah.
I love that. Yeah, and you said you weren't in a great place mentally, and something that I've really dug into recently is my mental health, and talking to other people and having those kind of deeper conversation, those uncomfortable conversations. What is your relationship with mental health and your own mental health? It sounds like you're very good at reflecting, right? Of reflecting and
Mm-hmm.
during that time where you were at. Um, have you been able to start to recognize them sooner? When you're in those states, has it been just kind of a natural progression of being more aware of them, or did you make, a very deliberate, um, you know, focus on, looking at that, your mental health and your mental well-being?
Mm-hmm. Mental health is something that I fortunately don't struggle with to the extent that I know a lot of individuals. I want to say that at the beginning.
Mhm.
I'm very, very fortunate with that. It's something though that I do try to be proactive about it, because even if I may not struggle with depression, we all have our ups and downs and we all have our low moments. So with being proactive, I'm very mindful of like a morning routine and implementing habits that are really beneficial and essential for my mental health, as well as understanding what relationships are positive for my mental state. So yeah, I'm coming back to the question. Sorry. That was just you were asking my relationship with my mental health. Was that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um it became probably predominant becoming just aware of my mental state and that I can shift it. Sometimes some people can't, and you need some added help, but most of the time for most people you can. And so with that was kind of when I began my spiritual journey, and it began discovering the world of self-development and self-improvement, and that your thoughts create your reality, and your thoughts can change. You can shift your change you or sorry you can shift your thoughts, and you can shift your mindset. So during the time when I was kind of struggling with the mental health, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place.
No, that's okay. I'm following you.
Can you come back to the question? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Jared.
No. That's okay. And I think a lot of it in kind of what you're getting to is awareness around it, right?
Uh-huh.
Really
Uh-huh.
conscious effort towards it. Um, yeah, and it's actually, it's funny how you started out, and it's something that I do a lot of times as well, where you kind of qualified it as, I don't struggle as much as some other people. And
Mm-hmm.
why that kind of ticked in my brain is because I've had a very interesting relationship with, call it like, depressive episodes, right?
Okay.
Where, I've never been, call it, diagnosed, and like I've been seeing a therapist for a couple of years now, and it's never been, something that we've very specifically touched on, of like being diagnosed with depression or anything like that. However, I do have depressive episodes, right? Where, sometimes for a week or a couple weeks at a time, I'll just have this overwhelming down feeling, right? Where I'll be down all the time for no reason. Um, and yeah, and so, that was something that I realized the first kind of, again, call it episode, was I think my first year university. And I had just broken up with my longtime girlfriend that we were dating in high school, and then into that first year university. And, that whole like first love kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
first
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And, looking back on it, it wasn't a great relationship. However, it really put me into that space where for a couple weeks, it was really just that overwhelming, call it like almost a cloud over me. Right. But at the same time, there's this feeling of, well, I don't want to, say that I struggle with depression, because I know a lot of people really struggle with it. And yeah, and so I don't know why, but it's an interesting conversation I have with myself a lot of times of, you know, do I need to qualify it? Why am I qualifying it? And, not wanting to take away from what a lot of people struggle with, and, really struggle with. And at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, still acknowledging that I struggle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's been something for me. Like, as you could tell how I talked about it, like I was getting uncomfortable. And it's because I always will, if I do talk about it with other people, it's always saying, oh, I'm feeling really blue, but the sun's shining, so I have no reason to feel that way. I live in Canada. I'm so privileged. Rah, rah, rah. But sometimes in order to move through it, you need to accept it and acknowledge it and be like, I'm feeling blue. I'm just going to feel blue for these few days. And again, I'm not speaking from a place of depression. I'm speaking just from a place of like a low moment. As well, at the same time, I'll say, oh, I'm feeling a bit blue, but I am not like XYZ who is actually struggling with depression. And I'm just putting myself down and putting down how I'm feeling and the things that I'm going through, and feeling quote unquote guilt for it. So that's been something I've been trying to personally navigate if I'm being vulnerable. But I'm coming to realize that by denying myself of feeling that way and allowing myself to feel that way and talk about it with other people, it's just hindering myself and making the process and the feelings go on, perpetuate for longer than they need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's been one of the biggest breakthroughs for me is, just allowing myself to feel it, right?
Mm,
You don't need that justification. You don't need that,
yes.
right? A big one that I've talked about a lot is removing the shouldn'ts and the shoulds,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
I shouldn't feel this way because I'm blessed, because I live in Canada, but I do feel
mhm,
this way, and
mhm,
that's okay. And I'll allow myself to feel this way, and I'm gonna, go deeper and see, is there a specific trigger for this of why it's coming up, or is it something that I can't recognize, or am I just off, right? And
mhm.
it's so funny. I don't know why in my brain, but it came back to that what you said earlier of no is a complete sentence, right?
Yes.
And that same
Yeah.
idea of you don't need to justify it,
Mhm,
right? Like sometimes you can just be. You can just say no because you don't want to. You don't need a reason, right? You can feel down because you're feeling down. You don't need to have a reason. It doesn't need to be this earth-shattering, life event that has brought you down so it's acceptable.
mhm,
Sometimes you're just having a bad day. Sometimes you're having a bad week. Um, and recognizing it, accepting it, not pushing it down, which is a big one for me, and allowing yourself to work through it, right? And I was talking about this, I can't remember when, I think it was a couple episodes ago, but it's checking in with myself of sometimes it's just a day. Sometimes I'm just having a down day. It's like, okay, I'm having a down day. Let's go to bed. Let's see how we feel tomorrow. 9 times out of 10, it's gone, right? It's a new day and it's fine. When it starts becoming, an extended period of time, it's like, okay, now let's really look into this, right? Let's see what's going
mhm.
on. Is there something that I need? Is there something to look into? And just keeping it in that consciousness. So,
Can I
yeah,
ask you a question about that?
yeah, for sure.
How do you check in with yourself? So, do you do it in a meditation pre, post, or during? Do you journal about it? Do you speak with like people you feel comfortable with, or like how do you explore that with yourself?
For sure. Yeah. I, and I don't know if this is quote unquote normal, but I have conversations
I
with
love it if it's not normal.
but I'm constantly talking to myself in my head. Like my
Mm,
brain, I'm just always talking. And now that I have consciousness around it, I'm a lot better at being like, oh, wait a minute. Like I'm feeling weird. Like, what's this
mm,
weird feeling? Oh, okay. Is it sadness? Is it, something bothering me? And so just checking in with myself. I'm really bad for meditation. I do it every once in a while. During quarantine, actually, I was doing it quite consistently and it was really helping me. And then I kind of lost interest in it. And I'm very much in my head all the time. And so I don't journal a ton. It is something that's helped me when I can't get something out of my head. I'll put it down
mhm,
on paper and just to get it, out of my brain kind of thing.
mhm. Yeah.
And a huge one too is just talking to people that I really trust and am close with, right? And
Mhm.
so probably the biggest one for that is my men's group that I'm a part of with Andy and Nuke and some other amazing gentlemen. And also, even my sister is a big one to a different degree, I'll call it, where our relationship
Okay.
has changed a lot over the last couple of years and we've become a lot closer. And it has become a place where I'm starting to share as well. Instead of
Mm,
only, receiving that energy, I'm now starting to be a lot more open and honest with her as well of, hey, like I'm feeling this way, right? And
mhm.
so that's been a really interesting one, but has been super helpful for me.
Did you find that like are you an older brother or younger brother?
Older brother.
So did you find that you couldn't was it like a masculine thing where you can't really share how you're feeling, but also too you have to be the older brother, you have to pull your sister through the hardships, you can't have her to lean on? Was that like a factor in your relationship? And then maybe once you became adults, you're more equal, or why did you feel you couldn't
Yeah, yeah.
talk to her?
It's something that has flown through my entire life. Of I've
Okay.
always had very uneven relationships, and
Interesting.
yeah, starting to realize,
Interesting word. I
yeah,
want you to explore that.
yeah,
Sorry, now I'm like going on a tangent.
no, tangents are great.
Okay, great.
Um, yeah, it's so in every relationship that I've ever had, friendship, work, romantic, whatever it might be, I have always been, call it like the quote unquote emotional rock, right?
Mm,
I've always been, you know, the one that will receive energy. Like, bring me your issues, whatever it is you're struggling with, I'll help. And I will never tell you what I'm struggling with. I will never need anything from you, right? Like, I'm here to give to you. I'm not here for you to give to me. And a lot of that came from, again, what we talked about a little bit earlier is that idea of perfection. Of, if I ask for something from you, it means that I'm not perfect. And, subconsciously, I think that that means you won't want to have any sort of relationship with me anymore. And so it was also the seeking for approval, right? Of, here, I'll help you do this. I'll help you do this. I'll help you.
Yes, yes.
Let me show you my worth. Let me show you my worth by helping
Mhm.
you, or by being there for you, whatever it might be. So it's kind of an overarching, you know, theme to my life, and something that I've put a lot of consciousness into changing, of, you know, bringing relationships to even and equal relationships instead of always uneven.
Mhm.
Um, with my sister specifically, we had a very, very bad relationship growing up.
Okay.
Call it, I always, to put it into perspective for people, I tell them we lived in the same house and didn't speak for 5 years, right? Unless we were fighting.
Mhm.
And, she's gone through a ton in her life. She's had a very difficult life. And, for me, it was always the feeling of not wanting to overwhelm, right? Of,
Mm.
we started to repair that relationship, and now, like, we're best friends. Of, she's probably the closest person to me, and so we've really, turned it around. However, there was still always that, I don't want to overwhelm her. Like, oh, she already has so much going on, I don't want to add to it, and therefore, I'll help her. And
Mhm.
it was so funny too, of, like we've talked about a couple of times, where bringing that relationship a little bit closer to even, and me sharing with her things that I struggle with, or by me putting boundaries up with her, has actually made that relationship so much stronger, right? So,
Mhm. Mhm. That's all. Thank you for sharing that. I know that would
yeah.
would have been very personal, so I appreciate that.
No, not at all. That's, that was a big, I mean, yes, it was personal, but that is a big thing that I have, again, put a lot of conscious effort into, of, being vulnerable in front of people, again, to work at that idea of perfection,
Mhm.
of, showing off my flaws, showing that I'm not perfect, putting them out. And, for me, that's one of the reasons why I started the podcast, is I was always so afraid to put myself out there, to be judged, to, quote unquote, look stupid, or to screw up, or to
Mhm.
fail at something. And for me, I'm very much all or nothing. Right. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put, a lot of my insecurities out there for the world to see, and again, always catastrophizing that, and then doing it and being like, oh, look at that, it wasn't that bad. And so it's been a very healing process for me. um,
Mhm.
and so, you know and again, with practice, it's become easier and easier. And so, I'm able to talk about that relationship with my sister.
Mhm.
There's still things that I won't go into, kind of publicly, let's say. um,
Totally.
However, for those people that I'm super close with, like, especially the men's group, which has been immensely helpful for my mental health. It's crazy where, now I've known those guys almost a year, and they know every single deep, dark secret about me. Every single one. Ones that I thought I was going to go to the grave to, that I could never show to anybody or tell anybody about, because, how could anybody ever accept me if they knew these things about me? And sharing those, and I call it getting the poison out, right?
Mhm.
And seeing that I can still be loved and even liked, that, showing these imperfections, and these people, these men still care about me, has been huge. And so trying to show other people how healing that is by doing it, not only to heal myself,
Publicly.
but to show other people that, you can put these things out and you can talk about these topics. So
Mhm. I love that. And, like, I think it was Nuke that said, like, leading with vulnerability. That was something that resonated with me. Like, I think it's a beautiful, it's what you're doing. And I think it's awesome.
thank you. I appreciate
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Amazing tangent. I loved that. I did kind of want to back up a little bit though, and going back to
Yep.
Australia, and another question I had about it. And first off, being, would you classify yourself, as an extrovert or an introvert, or how do you think about that?
Mm.
And the reason being, and where my question is going with this is, it's interesting even hearing you say that, you only had really one close friend growing up, right? You didn't have a huge group of friends, and then all of a sudden you move across the world and have to meet new people and make friends. And a lot of people are scared shitless to do that here where they live, let alone like
Mhm.
somewhere where they don't know anybody. So just talking about that and how your journey worked with that.
Totally. I'm obsessed with the introverted extroverted question. The Myers-Briggs personality test is like my favorite thing. I make all of my friends do it. Um, to give you like break it down in numbers, I am, and the only reason I'm highlighting this is because I think it's really descriptive into who I am and my personality. When I took the Myers-Briggs test, for example, I was 51% extroverted and 49% introverted.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, that's me. So I can present myself as very extroverted and personable, and I can put myself out there. I don't feel uncomfortable with that. Throughout my life, I've always kind of been really like secure in myself. And growing up, I did just have one friend mainly, but it wasn't from a lack of trying.
Mm,
I went to a really small school until grade 9, and then once I entered high school, I didn't know a single person in my school. And I would go around introducing myself to the different groups of people, but I just felt there was no connection with these individuals. People just didn't resonate with me, or I didn't resonate with them.
mm,
Um, and so I found I'm not a person that likes surface conversation. I get really uncomfortable with that. And I think that is also influential into why I only had one friend, because I would try and have conversations with people that would make them feel uncomfortable, or you can only meet someone as far as they've met themselves as well. And so that's a more of an introverted tendency, is having deeper one-on-one conversations. Cutting to traveling and having to meet new people, it wasn't that difficult for me to put myself out there. I was always in jobs where I was doing like sales or hospitality, where I had to build those skills throughout my life, especially from the age of 14 to 20 or whenever it was I went to Australia.
mm.
And then it was a matter of sitting in a hostel room and spending the entire day by myself again, and realizing that there is literally not a single person I know here. So I have no other choice. And literally being physically pushed to meet new people, that really helped me to be more extroverted. But once you just do it once, it was like domino effect. I remember I arrived, I landed on the plane. It's something I wanted to do for like nearly 3 years, and I did it, and I got there, and I had fear. I just was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I can't do this. Like, this was a joke. What was I thinking?
Yeah.
And my mom's just like, oh, okay, Emma, just go have a nap and talk to me in a minute.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And I remember lying on the bed in my hostel. I like couldn't sleep, and this girl walks into my room, into my like hostel room, and she's like, "Oh, like you're not Sarah or whoever she's looking for." I'm like, "Oh no, like this first person I've talked to."
Yeah.
And then she was like, "Oh, well, you sound like me. Like, oh, are you Canadian? Because there's a lot of English backpackers in Australia." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, I'm Canadian." She's like, "Me too. Like, come with me." And then she's like, "Come meet all my friends." And I was like, "Oh my God!" And it was just this like moment of like, I'm gonna be okay. Like, I was just in my own head. But to be honest, like even someone that resonates being more extroverted and doesn't necessarily have a difficult time with that, to people that do, it's uncomfortable for everyone. I gotta say, walking up to a group of people that you don't know a single person, and they're all sitting there eating dinner together and be like, hi, it's gonna be uncomfortable. But just the more you do it, the more comfortable you will feel doing it in a way, for
I
sure.
love that.
Yeah.
Just because I'm curious, what's your full Myers-Briggs four letter?
I'm an ENFJ.
NFJ. I am
Yeah.
INTP.
INGP? Wait, what?
INTP.
INTP.
Yeah.
Ooh. What is the like word for it? Mine's the advocate. What is yours?
Mine is the logician.
Ooh,
Uh,
I don't think I've ever seen anyone with that one.
yeah,
I'm gonna look it up after.
it is so funny because I have always hated personality tests. And
Really?
the first sentence got me, and I'm like, shit. Like, okay, this is. rare because, and like hearing you say that, I was like, yes, because literally the first sentence, I believe, is something along the lines of the logician is a very rare personality type, which is good because they would hate nothing more than to be considered common. And I was like,
Oh,
yeah, that's me.
I love that.
Super cool. In the last couple of minutes here, I wanted to touch on your podcast.
Hmm.
So, you know, we already talked a little bit about kind of why you started it, but maybe go a little bit more into depth there. Why you started it? What are some of the things that you've learned from it? If there's any, highlights that you want to bring up, just kind of giving you the floor to talk about that and your experience doing it.
Totally. Totally. The medium of podcast was something that was influential in my spiritual journey, spiritual awakening. So I always really resonated with the medium of podcasts, and I always wanted to contribute in that way. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but for years I talked about starting a podcast before I actually did it. And so throughout my life, I keep talking about I flew solo and things like that, but I was always looking for deeper connection. So throughout my life, I found myself trying to have conversations that were not appropriate in certain settings. So I'm asking my fellow employees what their life story is, what their hardships are on a retail floor. That's not a safe space to have those conversations. And as well, um, I wanted to meet new people. I wanted to be forced to meet new people. So coming back to Calgary, especially, I have my circle of friends and I have my little bubble. So I'm not really forced to meet new people because I have all my friendship needs met, quote unquote. Having a podcast has allowed me to dive deeper into the conversations that I am having and provide a safe space to really understand what other people's stories. As well, it's allowed me to reach out to new people such as yourself and create new connections and learn more about other people. And I always say the purpose of my podcast is to broaden my perspective and maybe even yours as well, is what I say at the beginning of my podcast, which is through me broadening my perspective and quote unquote publicly learning, as we've talked about, and asking kind of the dumb questions, but that we all are too afraid to ask sometimes. I hope that other people can gain value from that and learn from that as well. So that was why I created the podcast as well. Kind of behind the name of like the curious one is I'm always curious. I'm curious about everything. I question everything, and not from a like a negative light, just like, oh, why? And I would always find myself, I'm the kind of person that has 100 tabs open on my computer, 100 tabs open in my Safari on my phone, because I'm just innately curious. So I wanted to explore that. And as you, I feel like our podcasts are very similar. I've really enjoyed consuming the content of yours.
Thank
Is
you.
just, I want to learn about different things. Like I'm doing a segment now on autism. I did one on tiny homes. I have all different kind of perspectives and topics, and I love that the medium allows me to explore anything I choose. So
I love that. And
yeah.
I think something that hit me so hard, and again was, so quote unquote simple, is that willingness to ask those stupid questions, right? Of, and I went right back to being in class, right? When you're growing up, being in class and you don't want to be the one that puts your hand up and asks a stupid question,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but it's typically the question that 80% of the other people are wondering as well. And so I
Mhm.
love that, and I love that view on it.
Mhm. And I think you personally, like you have done such a good job of that, especially asking the difficult questions. Your conversations have stirred a lot within me, and in a scary but a good way, like a uncomfortable being comfortable being uncomfortable. So I really respect that, and I hope you just keep going with this. I think you're doing a great job.
I appreciate that a lot. And yeah, and your name really resonated with me, of the curious one, because that's where a lot of my questions come from. And again, that idea of,
Hmm.
not asking why in a cynical
Yeah.
sense, where, in reality, it's almost like a why not, right?
Hmm.
Like, but just genuinely curious about people and about those questions. And that's kind of, a lot of times why I don't like being super scripted, because I just kind of let my curiosity lead the conversation of, oh, that sounds interesting. That sounds interesting. And
Totally. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. And I appreciate it a ton. Um, before we end here, I just wanted to ask if you had any questions, if there's anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to, anything like that.
Nothing that we didn't get to. And I know that you did a whole podcast episode on it, but I think that you should share why you created your podcast in a short summary, because I know you have a whole episode on it, which I've listened to, so people can listen to that. But can you touch on why you created a podcast?
Yeah, I guess the quick summary would be I identified with my therapist of like one of the things the thing that scares me the most and that I actually crave the most is being in the spotlight.
Ooh.
I want to be noticed. I want to be seen. And at the same time in my life, as soon as, I'm quote unquote seen, I get super scared and step out of the spotlight as fast as I can. And so it was that, that juxtaposition of wanting to be seen and being super afraid to be seen. And so, with that realization, and one day she asked me, she said, what is something that you would quote unquote never see yourself doing that you're a little bit interested in? And I was like, putting myself out there, being, somewhere in the future, say like a public figure, right? I had no idea for what or anything like that, but the first step of putting myself out there, stepping into that spotlight, and I was like, okay, well, how could I do that, right? And a lot of it came from insecurities as well. So, before this, I would post on social media one every couple of years. I would always make the joke of like, okay, I better update my profile picture. It's been 2
Your
years.
annual, yeah.
Yeah. And so just forcing myself to put myself out there. And I went, well, how can I do that? I'm like, well, I can talk to people. So I could do a podcast. And I was just like, yeah, basically, fuck it. I'm going to do it. And going in with the fact, or with the reasoning being that it's for me and it's to help me. And I would love it to help other people as well, even if that's just one person. Even if I get 10 listens total, it'll be worth it because I want to try it. I want to put myself out there. And it's turned into something that has been very good for my mental health, has pushed me a ton to get out of my comfort zone. And yeah, and it's something that I enjoy. And so, yeah, I guess that's the quick version.
I love it. And I'm sure you're the same as me. Last thing I know, we're closing up. But even if no one was to listen to these conversations and they weren't being recorded, I would be so happy. Like just that in itself, I gained so much fulfillment, so much value from those connections that it's beautiful that I get to share them with other listeners. But at the core of it, just building that connection is great.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's so funny of how as soon as you open yourself up to having conversations like this that are deeper, that go a layer down, I've found it crazy how the conversations I've just randomly found myself in.
Yes.
And an example is, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago now, I reached out to a guy that I sort of knew from a couple years ago. Always just kind of liked him, right? And another big focus in my life right now is just reaching out to people, catching up with people, and quote unquote networking. And I was like, oh, maybe I feel like he'd be a cool person to have on the podcast as well. But so I reached out and like, yeah, let's go for a drink. And hadn't talked to him in a couple of years and had never known him past the surface level. Had maybe had a handful of conversations in our entire life, and we got into our childhoods of like all the things we went through and like this extremely deep and interesting and fulfilling conversation. And yeah, like you said, those conversations are fulfilling and I love having them no matter what. And so it's just been cool to open myself up to them.
I think that's great. It's awesome. I love the synergies like that.
Yeah, I love it. So last question is, what does this next phase of your journey look like?
Ooh. This next phase, I would say it's definitely growing the podcast and exploring it further. As we just keep talking about it, I'm sure it's clear from the conversation. I love it. Like I've never found anything that makes me feel and fill needs that the podcast does. So I'm just going to go with that. I'm just going to follow my curiosity and see where that leads for sure. It's COVID, so I eventually would like to travel again, but I'm just going to stay here while I can. And as well, I was gone for 2 years, so just rebuilding the relationships with family and my close friends that I have back here in Calgary for sure.
Love that.
Mhm.
Where can people find you if they want to connect?
Yes. I'm the same as you. I never really use social media. So when I created a podcast, it's kind of now my only form of social media. So I'm at the Curious One podcast on Instagram. And then my podcast is the Curious One podcast. It's on Google, Spotify, and iTunes as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was absolutely amazing. I loved every second of it. And yeah, I can't wait to chat soon.
Yes. Thank you, Jared. It was an honor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.